Welcome to my channel.
And this is English Podcast Station.
Today we're taking a close look at a very specific resource one you sent over for us to explore. It's designed for English language learners, specifically focusing on how to talk about hobbies.
That's right. And our mission for this deep dive is really to unpack this material you shared. There's notes, excerpts, summaries, even a quiz and a transcript snippet. All seem to be from a lesson, probably from the English Podcast Station, called Talking About Your Favorite Hobby.
Right, so think of it like we're diving into a beginner's toolkit. We want to pull out the most useful bits, the language tools, and just understand the approach. How does this resource make talking about something personal, like a hobby, accessible for someone just starting out in English?
Exactly. How do they build that foundation? And the most logical place to start, which is what the source material does, is the core idea itself. What is a hobby, according to them?
Yeah, they're really clear about this, aren't they? It's defined pretty explicitly as something you like to do when you are not working or studying.
And they really hammer that home, that distinction. It's not work explicitly. It's something you do for fun.
That seems quite important for a learner, right? It immediately separates it from, like, obligations.
Mm-hmm.
It's about leisure time, enjoyment, and the material gives some examples straight away to illustrate. Painting, cooking, playing football, reading books, playing the guitar, gardening, dancing. It sets a clear boundary for the topic.
And to make that definition less abstract, more relatable, the lesson uses personal examples. These seem to come from the podcast hosts in the source, James and Erica.
Yeah, that's smart. Yeah.
Yeah, it means it's not just dry definitions. You get actual people talking about their interests.
Absolutely. So James's hobby is playing the guitar. What specifics do we get about him from the source?
Well, it gives just enough detail to make it feel real. He's apparently played for 5 years.
5 years. Okay, so he's not exactly a beginner himself, even if the lesson is for beginners.
Right, good point. And he plays every weekend, so there's consistency. The source also notes he sometimes plays alone, sometimes with friends.
Ah, so it covers both solitary and social aspects.
Exactly. And his reason for enjoying it. Simple. It makes him happy.
Simple, clear, effective. Okay, then there's Erica. Her hobby is baking.
Ah, yes, baking.
Yeah.
And the source makes sure to highlight she especially loves baking chocolate cake.
Always a relatable detail. And we learned she started, quite young, age 15 years old.
Yeah. And there's another nice personal touch there. She was taught by her grandmother.
Oh, that's lovely.
Isn't it? It adds a little story, a family connection right there in the example. Makes it much more memorable.
Definitely. And she usually bakes on Saturdays.
And her reasons.
Yeah.
She finds it relaxing and fun. And, well, maybe unsurprisingly for someone who bakes, she also just likes sweet food.
It's interesting, isn't it, how the source uses these little personal stories. They sort of preload the examples of how to talk about it, the what, when, who, with why, even before they explicitly teach the language structures.
Which brings us nicely to that part, the language lesson itself. This is where the material gives learners the actual phrases to use. What's the core toolkit they lay out?
They boil it down to 3 really simple, direct sentence structures. The first one is, my favorite hobby is. And the example they use is, my favorite hobby is drawing. They also mention the simpler version, just, my hobby is.
Okay, so starting with my favorite hobby is gives the learner a really clear frame, subject, verb, and then just slot in the hobby. Very direct.
Right. And then to talk about when you started the structure is, I started my hobby when I was, with the example, I started my hobby when I was 10.
And you can immediately see how that maps to Erica's example. I started baking when I was 15 years old. It's a simple structure for learners to convey that kind of origin or duration information.
Exactly. It's almost like a formula you can just follow. And finally, for the why, the structure is, I enjoy it because, example, I enjoy it because it helps me relax.
And that ties right back to the fun, not work definition, doesn't it? We
Mm.
see with Erica, baking is relaxing and fun, and with James, playing guitar makes him happy. That because structure gives a simple way to explain motivation.
So instead of getting bogged down in, say, complex grammar about preferences or how long you've done something, the source gives these three specific, really common sentence patterns. It definitely lowers the barrier for someone who just wants to say something about their hobby. Very practical.
hmm And beyond just those specific examples from James and Erica, the material also helps learners think more broadly. It does this by grouping hobbies into categories.
Ah, yeah, that helps with vocabulary, right? And maybe helps people identify activities they do but hadn't thought of as hobbies.
Precisely. They list 7 categories in the source. First is sports.
Okay, like football, basketball, swimming, the usual suspects.
Yeah, the ones they list. The number 2, music.
Which covers quite a range: singing, playing piano, listening to songs, and playing guitar, like James.
Right. It shows it's not just playing an instrument. Listening counts too. Third category is art.
So drawing, painting, making crafts, creative stuff.
Yep, then cooking or baking.
Which brings us back to Erica. Makes sense to group those.
Then fifth is reading books or writing stories.
Interesting, putting consumption and creation together there. Reading books was one of their first examples, wasn't it?
It was. Number 6 is dancing, another early example.
Okay. And finally, number 7, traveling or photography.
That's an interesting pairing. I guess both often involve exploring, documenting, even if the actions are different. So this categorization, it doesn't just help you place your own hobby, but it gives you related vocabulary, broadens the scope a bit.
But just knowing the words and categories isn't enough, is it? You have to actually use them. The source material seems big on practice. How does it guide learners to, actually speak?
It uses a couple of methods. One key thing is posing specific questions that directly prompt learners to use the structures they've just learned. The 4 main questions they highlight are, what is your favorite hobby? When do you do your hobby? Who do you do your hobby with? And why do you like this hobby?
And that lines up perfectly with the sentence structures they taught: the what, the when, the who, the why. Simple mapping. And the way the original source podcast apparently uses them is by having the hosts, James and Erica, ask and answer first, like modeling it.
Yes, exactly. They demonstrate it.
Mm.
And then, crucially, the resource prompts the listener, you, to answer out loud during pauses in the audio.
Ah, that's clever. Simple, but it gets the learner actively producing the language straight away, simulates an interaction.
Yeah, it's active recall, active practice. And they reinforce this with a short role-play conversation that's included in the material.
Okay, what's the setup for that?
The scenario is basically meeting someone for the first time.
Hmm.
Puts the language in a very common, practical context.
Right. And how do they bring up hobbies in that role play? Is it just, what's your hobby?
No, it's a bit more natural. The key question used is, what do you like to do in your free time?
Which is a much more common way to ask, isn't it? A good icebreaker.
Definitely. So the role play demonstrates how talking about hobbies isn't just like a classroom exercise. It fits naturally into getting to know someone. It shows the practical use of those simple questions and answers in a mini real life chat. It's a nice progression. Learn sentences, answer questions, then have a short dialogue.
Okay, so the resource wraps things up by reinforcing the key points and suggesting ways to keep practicing.
That's right. They do a quick recap of those core sentences. My favorite hobby is, I started when I was. I enjoy it because just hammering them home one last time.
Making sure they stick, and the practice advice.
Super actionable, really simple. Talk with friends or record your voice. Accessible methods for anyone.
Yeah, no fancy tech required. Just speak.
It really underscores that language learning isn't passive. You have to produce output. The whole structure of this resource, really, from the basic definition to the examples, the specific sentences, the practice prompts, it's all designed to get a beginner speaking about something relevant to them. It's Very focused, very scaffolded.
So, what's the takeaway then, looking at this resource? We've sort of peeked inside this beginner level English learning tool focused on hobbies, thanks to the material you shared.
And what we found is a very clear, quite structured method. Define simply, give relatable examples, offer specific language patterns, almost templates, group-related ideas, and then immediately build in practice. It breaks down what could feel like a big task, having a conversation in a new language, into these manageable steps. And it centers it around a topic that's personal and usually positive.
Yeah, it really highlights how having that clear framework, like those 3 sentences and 4 questions, combined with those concrete, slightly personal examples, James's guitar, Erica's baking, makes learning feel much more achievable. Especially for beginners, it seems very effective.
Which kind of leads to a bigger thought, doesn't it? How much does having such a simple, clear framework impact our ability to learn and share any kind of new concept, not just language? Think about understanding complex information generally. Does breaking things down this clearly with simple structures and relatable examples make knowledge stickier and easier to communicate, no matter how complex the topic might seem initially? Something to maybe ponder until our next deep dive.